incoming chief resident at the University of Cincinnati, and I have the distinct honor of serving as EMRA's 46th president. And in 46 years, we've never seen anything like COVID, so it's been a very interesting time to be in a leadership position, I'll tell you that. But I am so grateful for all of you to join us tonight. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to my co-moderator, Nihal.
Hey there, everyone. I'm Nihal Naik. I'm a second-year resident at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and I'm your immediate past president for today, for the first time, from SAEM RAMS, which is the Resident and Medical Student Board. I'm equally excited about this phenomenal panel we have here today, people with a broad range of backgrounds who are now chairs. And let's see how we can potentially become one today. So we're going to introduce first Dr. Gabe Kellen. He's the founding EM chair since 1993 at Johns Hopkins. He's the EM physician-in-chief at Hopkins, along with as a professor of critical care and anesthesiology. He's on the Johns Hopkins Office of Critical Event Preparedness and Response, CPAR. And he also has an appointment to the Johns Hopkins Office of Health Policy and Management. He's also currently on the ACEP board, and his academic interests includes emerging infections, including HIV, surge capacity, and critical incidents.
Awesome. Well, next up, we have Dr. Bo Burns, who is a current chair at Oklahoma University and is a current member of the CORD Board of Directors. That's the Council of Residency Directors, perhaps for the med students in the room that may not know. So Dr. Burns, prior to being chair, also co-currently served as program director for a couple of years, overlap there. So I think he might be the only person in history that's both been program director and chair at the same time. He obviously trained at the one and only Oklahoma University, and it was the only place that he applied to for residency. So just consider that for a quick second and how things may or may not have been different then. Thank you, Bo, for joining us.
You bet.
And next we have Dr. Michael Brown, who's the founding EM chair at Michigan State. He's also the current president of the Association of Academic Chairs in Emergency Medicine. He's the senior editor of the great Cochrane Network. I'm sure you've read a lot from Cochrane before, focusing on emergency care and acute care, along with circulation and breathing. He was a resident at Michigan State University and Grand Rapids Medical Education Partners. Welcome, Dr. Brown.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Dr. Brown, for being here. Next up, we have Dr. Andra Blumkans, who serves as the inaugural chair at Stanford. She's the current president of SAEM's foundation and past president of SAEM. Now, prior to being chair at a couple different places, she actually served as program director at my institution, University of Cincinnati, where she was a chief resident and trained. So I'm very excited personally to have her join us today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And joining us, hopefully he's on the call yet, but joining us very soon otherwise is Dr. Ian V.K. Martin. He's currently the chair at the Medical College of Wisconsin. He's the EM physician-in-chief of Froedtert Hospital in Milwaukee. He is, as of today as well, also the immediate past president of SAEM, was the president last year. He's also the former founder and past president of the SAEM's Global EM Academy. Shows you a little bit where he's come from. And he was a resident at the University of Maryland, Shock Trauma, where he was also chief resident.
I'm here, Nihal.
All right.
Thank you for the introduction.
Glad to have you, Dr. Martin.
Thank you.
Last but certainly not least is Dr. Angela Mills, who's the inaugural chair at Columbia and is a current member of SAEM's board of directors. She trained Ken, and I'm going to just stop right there for a second because I have a lot more to do for Dr. Mills in terms of her introduction. So before we begin, I just want to give a couple of ground rules for how tonight's going to go. First and foremost, you have to have a drink. It doesn't have to be alcoholic, but we are here to have cocktails with chairs. So thank you, chairs, for whatever you're drinking tonight and for joining us. So with that, for this next part, I would like to have everybody turn on their cameras. If you're a participant and comfortable doing that, some of the things that have happened recently with COVID is that we just see less of each other, or at least the latter half of our faces are often covered. So I think now's a great time to see everybody in person in a virtual setting. So with that, I'd like to start the panel off by first giving a huge round of applause virtually to Dr. Angela Mills, because she has been named EMRA's first Chair of the Year. So if everybody could raise their glass to Angela, virtual cheers.
All right, cheers, Dr. Mills.
So why was Dr. Mills selected for this award? Well, it's very obvious to me and pretty much anybody that knows her, but I figured that it would be better to hear from the people that work for her as to why she is so incredible. So I have a couple of quotes that I just like to say very briefly. The first is from one of her residents, Cleavon, who describes her as down-to-earth, transparent, approachable, always providing opportunity for others to grow, and promoting diversity in every sense of the word. A quote from one of her vice chairs, Dr. Dan Egan, says this, and honestly, it brought tears to my eyes, so hopefully I can get through this. Dr. Angela Mills is undoubtedly the perfect first recipient of this award. As her vice chair for the last 2 years, I've witnessed and benefited truly from her authentic leadership. She encompasses the attributes that we read about in textbooks and that we aspire to achieve in our own careers. Dr. Mills leads by example. She's trustworthy, transparent, honest, and empathetic. We all dream of working with someone who has it all, outstanding clinically, aware of our operational needs, passionate about trainees, obviously, and a loving, devoted mother, a true academic physician and leader. Emergency medicine at Columbia has been transformed because of her for a number of different ways, but I think Dan Egan says it best when he says, I know I am a better leader because of her, and I hope to bring what she's taught me to the rest of my career. So thank you, Dr. Mills, for being an incredible leader and an incredible chair. All right. Nahal, would you like to start off the questions for our panelists?
Of course, let's get started. So let's kick this panel off. So first, we're going to start with the question that's more relevant to potentially the most people on this call, is take us back to what were you like as residents? So let's start with Dr. Burns.
You start with me?
Dr. Burns.
Oh, Dr. Burns.
So as a resident, I was, and thank you, good question. As a resident, I was 3 words, amazing, very eager, very overly ambitious. I was convinced everyone had WPW and C1 esterase inhibitor deficiency with a side order of ciguatera toxin poisoning. I was quite convinced that that was the case. I made my mistakes with great confidence. But you know what? That's part of the training, and we all got through it. I think in all seriousness, I felt scared to start my training. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be better than everyone else in my residency, not in a mean way or I'm getting ahead of you, cutthroat kind of way, but I was firmly convinced everyone was going to know more than me, be better than me, be more experienced than me, and I used that as my motivation. But I was so proud to train where I did and felt such a sense of ownership there that I think that helped me succeed.
And next, let's go with Dr. Blum for the same question.
Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, great. It's a great question, and it forces some recollection, which I think is sort of fun and kind of crazy at the same time. I was that proverbial resident that came early and stayed way, way, way too late because I had this problem with giving people work at the end of my shift, and I wanted to clean up everything nice and perfectly tidy, stainless steel, and otherwise, even to the extent that we had 12-hour shifts, I legitimately stayed until the next one because I was working the next day. So tragic and not a good use of, or not a great user of time. But nonetheless, that was me. My mission sort of throughout residency, and that has persisted, is just making things better, like finding stuff that doesn't make sense and seems silly or stupid and try to fix it and make it better. And often there's a ton of history behind why something is, and medicine's a very conservative, not willing to change kind of specialty, but I just sort of found a great deal of satisfaction in finding the things that were wrong and trying to fix them and sometimes actually getting there, so.
And next, let's hear from Dr. Kellen.
Thank you. So coming from Canada, I guess I would say I was a hoser, and I was a little bit of a Yahoo. for absolutely no real reason. I came to Johns Hopkins to train, and it was sort of like signing up for, I thought I was signing up for prison for 2 years. And it was pretty brutal, but having sort of kept the humor, and I was like Dr. Burns. I just assumed I was coming to this great place and I didn't belong. I was a poser as well as a hoser. And I just thought, well, I'll just see if I could survive this and get through it. But I ended up really thriving in that wild environment, and I learned how to fight, and I learned how to stand up for emergency medicine and for ourselves. And I really became a different person than I was before. Some of the hoser and Yahoo stuff still exists, but you'll have to work a little to find it.
Next, can we hear from Dr. Martin?
Yeah, I think this is a great question too, Dr. Nate. Let's see. So I was a non-traditional resident before it was popular to be a non-traditional trainee. I spent a few years as a school teacher before I even went to medical school. So I was a little bit older than my counterparts. And to add to that gap, I was an EMIM resident, which meant I was stuck around for a really, really long time while many of my colleagues went on to do other things. Some things never change. I was a perfectionist then and still haven't shaken that bad habit. I was a workaholic, but really, really had a great passion for what I did as a resident. And, you know, when I trained, which I think the first 3 years of my training was sort of pre-duty hour restrictions. And then the last couple of years were under the new rules. And that was a time sort of where the whole hospital ran completely on the backs of the residents. And I just remember that sense of like importance that I felt as a resident, where literally we knew like the University of Maryland couldn't run if the residents didn't come any day, and took great pride in that and all. So I left residency saying it's the best experience I never want to have again.
That's a quote I've heard a lot from many people who've graduated residency. Can we next hear from Dr. Mills?
Thanks, everybody. I originally thought I was going to be a surgeon, so started out in surgical residency. So I was definitely very happy to become emergency medicine resident when I matched into EM. You know, I guess I think this is it's a great question, but maybe a little tough. But I think, you know, sometimes when I look at my children, I think, you know, who they were really young, they still are as they're becoming, you know, as they're teenagers now. I think same thing, like who we were as residents does, a lot of it carries on with you. But I think if you ask my colleagues, my co-residents, they would say I was approachable. I was very responsible, attention to detail. You know, I pretty much had made friends with, you know, all of the nurses, all of the unit assistants, those kind of, you know, everybody in the department. So, and I was also a big foodie. So even though I'm very much on the introverted side, I was the one everyone would ask where to go to eat or what restaurant or what movie to go see. So I tried to also keep the well-being of the class and try to do some social events as well.
And Dr. Brown.
Yeah, well, I asked my wife that question once it was posed, and she came up with the same word I did, as serious, which I was very serious as a resident, especially the first year, and I had the similar inferiority complex as Bo and Gabe mentioned. I really felt like everyone else around me knew more. And that really bothered me. And so I really thrived on my peers. And I'm still to this day impressed with a few of my fellow residents and how much they helped me grow and develop, you know, during that time. Although we had great mentors, you know, faculty as well, it was the peer-to-peer learning that really, I think, you know, sort of drove the advancement. And I I had one goal. I wanted to be an excellent physician when I was done and be able to handle anything. And that was, I felt really proud of that when I was done and wanted to go out and use those skills. So that was me.
Yeah, so that's pretty incredible. I think the things that stand out to me that you all said were that, one, many of you struggled with imposter syndrome, though probably not even named at the time. You all described an incredible work ethic that got you obviously to where you are today. But a couple other things that I heard was introvert, which I love, because as someone that doesn't consider themselves an extrovert, believe it or not, that's great to hear that you can be chair as an introvert, and you can have teenagers as a chair. So thank you for sharing that with Dr. Mills. Really, I think the question at this point is, as residents are getting more and more attuned to the business side of emergency medicine and the future of our specialty and where it sits in sort of the landscape of things, I think it's becoming more and more common for residents to think, is chair in my future? But that's scary to think about so early in training. I'm curious if all of you could share a little bit about, like, what was that moment where you realized, I think I want this? And Dr. Mills, if you wouldn't mind starting.
Sure. Maybe mine came a little later, certainly was not as a resident. I guess I've always had or gravitated to leadership positions. So I was a chief resident, as you are, Hannah. And then I could say the first half of my career really was more in clinical research. And then at some point after I got promoted, I was asked to be the medical director. And I had kind of asked, like, well, why? I really haven't done any operations things. Why would you think I'd be good at this? And I got well, you're great clinically. All the nurses love you. You listen to everyone. It was more innate characteristics and not so much the experience. And so then I went down the leadership pathway there, and I really live by that quote of that you should work harder on yourself than you do on your job, because I think there's a lot to just whether it's leadership growth, et cetera. So I've spent a lot of time doing that and reflecting on figuring out how I can be a better leader, a better person. And then it just came to a point where I was a vice chair, and I felt like I wasn't able to continue growing or doing the things that I thought would be beneficial. So that's pretty much when I became a chair, or decided to become a chair, and the opportunities were available at that point. So.
Awesome. What about you, Dr. Martin?
Great question again. Let's see. So I started out my career. So I came full circle. I went to Duke undergrad, and my first faculty job was at Duke. And at that time, I definitely didn't have any plans to become a chair. I was content to be a great clinical educator of residents and students. And then I got recruited away about 5 years into my tenure as a faculty member over to UNC. And if you look at my CV, like, all of a sudden, it's sort of this hockey puck where my productivity as a faculty member really went up. There's papers and invited presentations and funding. And that inflection point was when I went to UNC, but really what happened at that point is I found great mentors. And I think mentorship is like a really, really important key, at least it's been to me in my success. While I was at UNC, I got a number of small leadership opportunities, and you'll find that if you say yes to those and you do a great job, people will give you bigger leadership opportunities. And I found myself in a career development program at the med school that was focused on folks who were sort of middle leadership roles who the institution wanted to invest further in for more senior leadership. And I had no plans at that time to leave UNC. But it was interesting. I remember the program leader in one of our sessions, this was a year-long program, projected the organizational chart for UNC Healthcare, UNC School of Medicine, and went through every single person who was on that chart. And one of the things that was crystal clear to me was that at least the culture at UNC was that everybody in senior leadership had a second degree. And to make a long story short, I found my way into business school. And that was probably the other really important inflection point in my professional career. For those of you on participating in the session who have gone to business school, essentially an MBA is a leadership degree. And so it's really at that point that I started thinking, well, Ian, why can't you be a chair? Why shouldn't you be a chair? And so it really instilled a belief that I never had before. And so now I've had the fairly unique pleasure of being a 2-time chairman. And so I think people, they see the finished product now and they find it pretty funny that not that long ago, I was suffering from imposter syndrome myself and certainly had no belief that I would end up, in where I am right now today.
Yeah, I love that. Dr. Blumkoms, you also have an MBA. Perhaps you should take this question next.
Yeah, so, I mean, the real Andra Blumkoms is a basic scientist. I'm happiest actually in the lab with my mice and things. And I've always fancied myself, I was going to be a basic science researcher, and got periodically, like Angela, tapped for research positions along the way, like not entirely clear. You know, I was asked to be residency director. I had no idea that was, I had not expressed a single desire to be that, but suddenly overnight I was a residency director. But also in that basic science career, and as happens in research a lot, things don't go necessarily the way you thought they might. So I lost my funding, and then I decided to sort of regroup and go to UT Southwestern, get an MBA in innovation and entrepreneurship, because I wanted to do device innovation and innovation in practices and that sort of thing. So I did that later. I'm not sure I'd recommend pursuing an MBA at the age of 47 ever again. The first time they said homework, I almost fainted. I was like, what do you mean homework? Like, I don't understand homework. And then it kind of got to the place where I really enjoyed mentoring people. And I got more joy out of mentoring students and people and residents and junior faculty than I actually did of doing stuff myself. And chair seemed to be the place to do that. And I got a wonderful opportunity and was able to take it.
Yeah, so definitely a different way to get there, but similar to others in some senses. Dr. Kellen, would you be willing to share your role?
Yeah, so I graduated before second degrees were invented. So I really tried hard not to be a serious person, but I guess like Oedipus, you can't quite escape your fate. And towards the end of residency, I remember thinking, as maybe some of you do, oh, please God, if you'll only make me a residency director, I'll never want for anything beyond that. And when I graduated, there were only like 4 faculty. One of them was the director and the 3 of us, and no one else was interested in education but me. So I became the residency director. But I discovered I did have a research bent at the same time. So I appointed myself research director of this tiny little nowhere department. And for those of you who may or may not know the history, back then we were so dissed, you can't believe it. I mean, it was just pretty ugly. And I didn't realize that when I first went into emergency medicine. I just went into it because it seemed like a fun Yahoo type of thing to do. And it really concentrated my mind that I didn't want to be part of a dissed type of discipline. And I just like really focused on doing whatever my role could be to bring this specialty into ascendancy. And about 7, 8 years into this dual role, my director left. And I'd never intended to be a director or a chair, because it looked to me like they did the dullest hard work that had no rewards whatsoever. But I was faced with a choice when the director left. I was really, really torn. If they brought in somebody else who wanted to take the department in a different direction, then whatever relationship I had with the director at the time and the way I saw what needed to be done, I found that astoundingly threatening. And so I threw my hat in the ring, initially unintentionally, but really that was my sole motivation. I didn't want to have another boss who took that department and emergency medicine in a different direction than I had already worked, for better or worse, for the previous 7-8 years. So I threw my hat in the ring, and I did become a chair. And it is radically different than what I had done before, but, and we'll probably get into this, astoundingly rewarding. I mean, I just can't describe how rewarding this journey has been.
Excellent. Well, we are getting a ton of questions in the chat. So for the sake of time and other questions, perhaps we'll move on to the next one, because I think, Dr. Kellen, you raise a great point of just, you wanted to be the person that really saw your department through, and you put your hat there almost because you felt the need to do it. And that's like really exciting to hear as an early resident. So Nahal, would you be willing to take us to our next questions that we'll get to that further?
Sure. Yeah, I know for the last question, every single one of these chairs really wanted to advance emergency medicine, and know all of us here want to as well. So let's start with the next question. So as the rest of us on this call who are EM physicians in training all come from various different backgrounds and potentially various different interests in emergency medicine, and may not even know what a chair does. So quick different question is, what's the most exciting thing you did this week as a chair in these very odd times we live in? Dr. Blumkamp, let's start with you.
Wow, most exciting thing this week. Well, I'm not really, I don't like to self-inflate stuff, so I have to, but I'm super happy about the fact I just got notice of $1.2 million in research funding for COVID-related research in the emergency department. So yeah, and I just put myself out there, so it just happened. So sorry, I don't mean to brag or whatever, but I'm just super happy about it, and it makes things feel better here for a while. So
no, don't apologize for that. One, humble brag, and two, that's incredible. We as residents want to know, like, what should we expect in the role of chair? What are the things that you do? So, and we're here to celebrate your successes. So please, we want to hear all of those things.
Dr. Brown, I want to hear what's the most interesting thing you did this week as a chair.
Well, one of the really nice things about being a chair is you do have some discretion in terms of what you do academically. And at least my deans have given me a lot of leeway. And that is really a fun part of the job. So for a while I was, editor and the Annals board, and now I think we're going to talk about it later, but now I'm a senior editor for Cochrane. And that was definitely the highlight of the week. I worked pretty hard this week with people in the UK primarily, but across the world they're struggling like the rest of the world is to try to get the evidence together for COVID. And, there's a lot of ongoing studies. It's hard to synthesize the evidence when there's really not much there, but we're sort of trying to tee everything up so that once some of these trials start to be reporting their data, we will be ready to synthesize that for the end users. And that gives me a lot of satisfaction. So I've been working with the team to prioritize which rapid reviews we should do, which ones are really important to the clinicians out there in the trenches.
That's really good to hear, especially in these times. Dr. Burns, any thoughts about this?
You asked during budget renewal season, so it hasn't been a super exciting week for us. I will say one of the things there's a couple of things I'm proud about, and you have to think about, what is the role of the chair? And I like to tell people that our role is to advocate for everyone, to help them succeed, right? To produce optimum circumstances to where everyone in the department succeeds. So this week, what that looks like for me is picking up 161 N95 masks to deliver to my faculty and residents so that everyone gets a brand new mask for every shift. And it's never thought that I would say that was a really exciting thing, but sometimes excitement is just doing the right thing and taking care of your people. In addition, I was able to secure some more funding for some non-clinical teaching time for 2 of my APDs. And the way things are looking financially right now, that was difficult. That was difficult to do, and that's something that I'm proud of. But again, like the other comments, that's our job, is to advocate for our people and stand up for our team.
That's really great to hear. I know that really shows the diversity of work that a chair does, from getting grants all the way to just getting your PPE for your colleagues. That's really good to hear.
Yeah, so I think that brings us up maybe to one of the common themes that's in the chat right now, actually, that's a little bit of a divergence that we had planned is, like, what about the failures? What about the hard days? If you could talk about that a little bit, and what you see as the biggest challenge that maybe you faced as a chair in your tenure. I'm not going to call on someone because that's a struggle. So maybe I can get a volunteer.
I'll volunteer on this because this is really easy.
Thanks, Dr. Martin.
Because I just had it like a couple weeks ago. So for those of you who are familiar with the DISC personality tool,
I'm a solid D.
I'm an I. I'm right in the middle of I, which means my why it matters is all about relationships. And, you know, we've in 8 weeks time gone from everybody's going to die from COVID to everybody's going to lose their job because of COVID. And, you know, we've had to make some really difficult decisions at our institution, like many of our colleagues who are on the call right now, and some decisions that really required to let some folks go. And I got to tell you, as a 2-time chairman and a now past president of a national association, it's by far the hardest thing I've ever had to do, is lead a group through a time where we've had to let some people go. And it's particularly hurtful to me because I do value so much the relationship with the people that I lead. And so that was a very easy question for me to answer. And it's very recent and raw.
Yeah, thank you for your vulnerability on that. I think as EM physicians in training, we're obviously very concerned about our future, and you know, a number of residents that have secured contracts are in struggles right now. And so while I don't want this to become a negative or a COVID, I really do appreciate you being genuine about that and the struggle that feels like. So Dr. Kellen, you had raised your hand as well. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I'll see if I can get through this. I've been around pretty long now, and we've had a number of deaths in the program amongst our residents.
We might have lost you, Gabe.
Yeah, I think maybe Dr. Kellen needs a minute, and I'm sure that hits home to a number of us right now that perhaps know somebody that has been affected. So we'll give him a second to come back. Perhaps we can transition to maybe something a little bit more upbeat in terms of, like, we've talked about a chair and what you kind of do on a regular basis, but the path there has been somewhat unique. And so I'm curious for Dr. Brown, you are the chair of chairs, right? So you're the immediate past president of SAEM's chairs group, AACEM. That's gotta be a wild group. You wanna talk about hosers and things. Can you share a little bit about your experience as chair of chairs and maybe what you see the future of being a chair looking like?
Sure. Yeah, I thank you for recognizing I'm the immediate past president. It actually transitioned today, so.
You got through it.
I really enjoyed being part of this group. The executive committee is just a fantastic group of people. And like I said before, I've been someone that thrives on sort of the energy of my peers back in residency, medical school, and now it's the chairs. They're my friends and colleagues. And so that group, it's sort of a a smaller, tight-knit group because we all have a unique sort of job. The thing that makes us unique in the academic emergency medicine chairs in that we all have education and research missions to deal with beyond the operations of the ED. And so I just really enjoy the camaraderie, the sharing of our struggles together. And that's one of the main purposes of this group that I was the president of last year. And it actually started as a dinner club, I'm told by those before me. And that's what it's still, that's a key part of the organization, is that networking and sharing both successes and struggles. And so to say, answer your question about this year in particular, obviously the COVID thing threw a huge a challenge at us. And in fact, we were supposed to have our retreat right about the time when this was all sort of escalating. And to tell you how difficult that was, it had been a pretty smooth year up to that point, but I had just gone to just to frame this, I'd just gone to a Michigan State basketball game Sunday night, 18,000 fans cheering on the Spartans. And the next morning, we're having a discussion about should we cancel our relatively small meeting of 200 people. And I'm like, no, I mean, why? Why? I'm at a game with 18,000 people. I don't think 200 people is going to be a huge problem. And boy, did I get flack for that. I mean, there was a lot of pushback from my colleagues, mostly through our listserv. And you know what? They were right. I was wrong. And I listened and changed. We changed our mind. And the next day we had to cancel. So that huge challenge, but I guess one of the lessons from that, you continue to learn, right? Even as a chair, hopefully you still have your ears and eyes open. And that was a real learning experience that, wow, I'm so glad we had people within our group that really voiced their opinion, felt comfortable voicing that opinion. And that's sort of the wisdom of the crowd. And it changed our trajectory, and it was a good thing, obviously, in retrospect. I don't know if I answered your question, but I rambled on a little bit.
No, I love that. And I think what you're getting to, and actually what the chat is getting to in Dr. Kellen's demonstration of his vulnerability, is sort of the cohesiveness of emergency medicine and culture. And so we have two experts, obviously, in terms of culture. That's Dr. Mills and Dr. Blum. Both of you are incredible leaders, incredible female leaders. And if I would say, like, hashtag girl crush, if I might. But you've both been recognized in terms of the cultures that you've created as inaugural chairs in your departments. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your keys to success. How did you do such a remarkable thing in terms of it being so intangible? Dr. Blum?
Well, it's very interesting because, I trained at one of the oldest programs, Cincinnati, as you know, and then to go to, and then to go to another new program, which was UT Southwestern, and then to go to even a newer department, which was Stanford. It was very interesting because you get to see the development of emergency medicine over time. And that emergency medicine is 50 years old, roughly, but in some places it's 5. And to try to show people on campus what real emergency medicine is, because there's always going to be a ton of people who say, oh, I practiced emergency medicine as some other specialty, and I know how that goes, and emergency physicians, it shouldn't be a specialty. And it's like, good grief, like how do you put that together? And what I phrased recently that seems to resonate is, okay, guys, well, we're talking about admissions and things. If you consult dermatology and they say that rash, you didn't know what it was, is X and treat it with Y, Or if that patient is pre-op and has cardiac issues and needs a cath to cardiology, you say, okay, well, they'll go to cath before. Why is it that when our specialty calls to consult or admit, there's some question that that's the right thing to do? That's our specialty. And that's left people fairly quiet and they haven't responded yet. But the notion that we have to claim our specialty is what it is, in a way that that sometimes isn't as obvious when you come from a place that's had emergency medicine for a long time. And it's hard work. It's really hard work, but it's very rewarding work.
Go ahead, Dr. Mills.
Oh, thank you. I guess very similar to Dr. Blumkowns, I came from a program that had a very established department for decades, and then went to a new program, a new department that, while it was a very renowned institution with very big giants in all of the other specialties, it was a brand new academic Department of Emergency Medicine just a little over 2 years ago. And I think what I found, at least internally, in making sure to build a culture that we all want to be part of, is really to start by listening. I really spent my first 6 months listening to everybody and trying to understand what the challenges were, what the issues were, and then making sure to uphold, you know, kind of the tenets that I believe in strongly. It's the transparency, being direct and honest, and you know, having equity and diversity. And so those are really the things that I've tried to follow. And then I would say, I think the last thing also is this concept of radical candor. I don't know if any of you have read the book by Kim Scott, or there's a TED Talk, which is a perfect, you know, 12-minute kind of TED Talk, but really talks about being direct with people, but also obviously making sure that you do it with compassion, right? So being able to have compassionate discussions with people, make sure that you understand how people are really feeling, being empathic, but also holding people accountable and being direct. So I think, you know, and taking it day by day and learning every day. So trying to improve every day.
That's really good to hear. And I think some of the big things, topics you brought up, is where you all came from into coming to these roles, as it was a challenge being at maybe large institutions with large foundational support. But we do want to field a question that kind of helped challenge this idea from Veer Singh. Could any of the chairs comment on the importance of a pedigree on road to leadership in emergency medicine? Did anyone come from newer EM programs, or just face an uphill battle at a foundation, creating a foundational network in a place that may not have the existing departmental links or the existing foundation of an academic program?
Well, I could speak to that. I would consider, I came from a non-quote academic institution. So Michigan State was my home through medical school. And we went out into different communities for our, you know, clinical training. And then, long story short, is, you know, I ended up at a community hospital that had it was more of a teaching hospital, but certainly not an academic, classic academic institution. But they were passionate about education, and we had a leader. She was a woman, Gwen Hoffman. Some of you may remember, but she ended up, I think, being the first female president of ABEM. And she's from a community hospital, but she was an amazing figure, and she drove us all to be better at what we do. But I guess I came from this, I had to develop the relationship with Michigan State, because it had been going on for a while from this community hospital residency, and it just never seemed to come to fruition. So Gwen sort of said, Mike, I was the associate residency director at the time, and she said, could you please go to these meetings with Michigan State? I'm tired of it. And so I started to go to these meetings, and it ended up accelerating. And so then we did build a relationship with the university and a medical school. And that's how I became the chair, because we didn't have an academic department of emergency medicine at Michigan State until 2013. So, you know, it can be done. It was a very wild, different path, but it is possible.
Okay. And again, we'll take a few more questions from the field. One of the things that people in the field have asked is, you know, all the physicians here have dealt with a lot of decision making, a lot of decision fatigue too in their academic careers. How do you foster positivity and combat issues of moral injury and wellness in your programs? And how have you instituted that culture at your institutions?
I can start off if that's okay with the group. I think the one thing that I would really advocate for, especially for the students and the residents on the call right now, thinking about, you know, what is your pedigree or what is your trajectory or what decisions are you going to make now that lead to potentially being a chair in the future? And I would say gravitate towards leadership, not administration, because those are two different things. At the hardest times, the most stressful times, that's when people are going to be looking at you the most in terms of developing followers and your followership quotient, as it's called, right? It's important to be a leader, but we need to also have, you know, demonstrate behaviors and decision-making and express characteristics that are going to draw people to us, right? That's how you make, you know, that's how you instill a culture. And just think about the things you've heard from the last, the few chairs that have spoken up in these last few times, the characteristics. And I really want everyone to think about this tonight: listening, understanding, changing your mind, you know, being flexible, being approachable, being compassionate. Those are the things that are going to help you, especially at the hardest times. But what I would say is it takes practice. It takes deliberate effort. You can't go out and play golf once a year and expect to be good at it or good at your short game. You need to practice, because practice makes permanent. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. It takes deliberate effort and energy and focus to develop some of these skills.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think the comment about leadership, not administration, really strikes home for me. Interestingly, though, all of you have served in leadership positions in addition to being chair. Dr. Burns on the CORD board, Dr. Kellen on ASEP's board, Dr. Mills and Dr. Martin on SAEM's board. I'm curious, what, you know, being chair is hard enough. Why did you take the next step? What did you need to accomplish? And Dr. Martin, I see a big smile on your face. I think I'm going to start with you on that one.
Well, I think serendipity plays a huge role in success, and certainly if it were as simple as planning out on a calendar how I would do my leadership roles, I wouldn't have planned to be doing chair and president of the society at the same time. But having said that, I do think there are some real, that brings some value to the position of president of SAEM. Today is an exciting day for me. While it's sort of sad to sort of see the coffin going into the ground of my presidency, it's been a great year, but I do look forward to getting back to just having one job, and the job of leading my department here. So I say all that to say, like, I would imagine the others will chime in and say that no one really plans this out. It's just sort of, I think an important part of leadership is being the person who is the one who raises his or her hands when there's a time of need. And so these things aren't, in my opinion, planned out to that sort of granular detail.
Maybe add to this.
Yes, please.
All of us, so I think we have to admit, all of us have egos, and most of us as chairs do like a certain amount of recognition, if not outright limelight. And so we're drawn to these positions where you could actually fail spectacularly and the whole world is watching you. but you need to show that you in fact can lead. But there's a second parallel process. You want to make a difference. You have this view or outright vision and you want to enact it. And the only way to do it is to aspire to these leadership positions. And these secondary gains that I just talked about, like ego and being in the limelight, are secondary, but you're really putting yourself out there in a very, very big way because everybody's judging you, but you have a purpose and you stick to it.
I love that, Gabe.
Because Mike, if I could add my thoughts on this, you know, one reason is, and I wouldn't have never guessed that I'd be more involved in professional organizations if you had asked me, you know, as a resident. But I've grown to really appreciate the networks that I've developed. The networks, again, I'm going back to that, those peers and friendships and professional colleagues. I wouldn't be chair if it weren't for those network opportunities. So I developed, maybe it was more important to me since I didn't have that academic sort of milieu that a traditional, you know, university classic department has. And so these networks I developed around the country were critical in my sort of professional development, and it fed into scholarship in multiple ways, both at SAEM and ASEP. And so it's a little bit, for me, it's also a payback. You know, it's like, hey, these organizations did so much for me. I want to give back. So that's my sort of answer to that.
Love that. Anyone else want to comment? All right, Nahal.
Okay. And just to round out in our last 6 minutes of this hour, we want to end on a good note to think about your legacy for the future. Looking on a few years from now, what do you hope your legacy will be to not just your department, but to current EM residents and incoming, potentially upcoming EM residents who are in your department, or maybe in your department? And this one, I want everyone to answer the question this time. Whoever wants to take a stab at it first. What's your legacy going to be for residents?
Well, I'll go first since my colleagues are being shy. So I would say I would like my legacy to be that I did my best, I gave it my all, and I tried to make a difference.
I like that. I've heard in terms of mentorship, you've got to think about, you need to have someone that you look up to and that is mentoring you, but you also need to think about someone who's you're mentoring to come behind you. And I think that's my goal, is to do just like Dr. Martin said, do my very best, leave everything out on the table. And then when I ride off into the proverbial Oklahoma sunset, everything just goes on and gets better. It's the same trajectory. It's just, it goes on without me and everything's just fine.
My legacy will be that the medical community at large finally realizes that emergency medicine runs everything. Held in the appropriate esteem. And the sooner you get to that conclusion, the better it is for you. There you have it. Thank you for letting me share.
I have to interject. That was just mic drop worthy right there. I think everybody's hands went up. Amen to that. That's awesome. What about our other chairs?
Yeah, I fully share Dr. Blumkind's vision, so I don't have a huge amount to add to that. That emergency medicine has come fairly close now, and it's up to the rest of you to take it to the next step, to be the supreme specialty of emergency medicine. And that's what we work towards. In terms of what do I want on my tombstone, not necessarily that, but what I'd like, particularly the residents, to read is 2 lines, teacher, and he cared.
That's beautiful. Dr. Mills?
Yeah, you know, being that we have a brand new academic department, I think I would say that the legacy would be that I helped to build and grow and maintain a place where people wanted to work, felt included, you know, were able to teach, to learn, to become leaders so that everyone's advancing and going off and doing wonderful things. And that it's a place where we maintain values.
That's awesome. So I have to ask, I got an email 2 days ago from a MS3 incoming MS4. And it went something to the effect of, hey, I reached out to a resident and they were talking about how the future of emergency medicine is basically going to be shit, for lack of a better term. And excuse me for that. But in terms of workforce, pay, all sorts of things that he had heard as a third-year med student that was going to affect the future of emergency medicine and his decision on whether or not he should apply to our specialty. And so I think that maybe it would be nice to end on your thoughts on, one, what does the future of emergency medicine look like? And do you have advice for the med students that are on the call that are thinking about this as a specialty, but also the senior residents that are entering the workforce right now? What should we be concerned about? What we should be excited about? I think that that's on everybody's minds right now in the setting of COVID, especially.
I can't help myself. I'm going to just start. I mean, first of all, I challenge that person where they get their data. I mean, we're now looking at health systems that had to essentially shut down, like all their procedures, all their surgeries, all their outpatient clinics. They had to adapt to telemedicine, all those things. Occupational health couldn't handle the load. Everything was just a mess. Who stepped up to the plate and helped the rest of the medical system survive and get back on its feet? It's really hard for me to understand how anyone in medicine at all could view emergency medicine any differently. And I expect that our numbers for emergency medicine will increase substantially. And I feel bad for, I feel like it's likely a person who told this MS3 to almost 4 to, because they're jealous and they want them to come to their specialty or something. But it's not rational to me to say that at this point.
If I could chime in. So first of all, I would invite that person to listen to my farewell speech today, because I did delve into some of this a little bit. I actually think the future for emergency medicine is quite bright. That doesn't mean we don't have our challenges. It doesn't mean we're perhaps going to go through some right sizing. Those are all really important things for us to do. But I got to tell you, and I said this when we started, I've always considered what I do as a physician a great privilege. And I try to tell our learners that we know things about our patients and we see parts of their bodies that not even their closest relatives have heard or seen. And so it's a great privilege to do what we do. And so I really have never been more proud to be a physician than I am now, and particularly an emergency physician. All of us on this call know that every day we're the heroes of the health system and we're the heroes for our patients. What's been really fun, and we've had little fun during the last 8 weeks, but what's been really fun to see is that everybody else in the world is now seeing what we know we do every day. So I am quite hopeful for the future. And I think it's a great time to be an emergency physician.
So Dr. Martin, I'm really impressed that you would sit down with this person and give them your time of day. This is somebody who wants to navel gaze, what's in it for me, woe is me, as opposed to someone who sees the future and wants to contribute. So wherever any of us leave off, emergency medicine can transform. We're really locked into the vision of what emergency medicine could be. It really, truly can be the be-all, end-all specialty if we think differently. And the specialty is such that if you come in now, even at this level of maturity, the level of contribution to fundamentally change the world of medicine is completely open to you. And if you want to do that, you're not going to worry that your salary is 30% lower or your benefits are decreased. All that kind of stuff will come out in the wash in the long term. So for those of you who want to think, what is my role in contributing to the further ascendancy of the House of Medicine, and particularly emergency medicine, then you have a golden future. If you're worried about what is it that we're giving to you, I'm sorry, not a lot of time for you.
Hey, Hannah, I heard that exact same speech when I was a resident too. That's been kind of out there for a long time. And I guess I'm a slow learner. I'm still here. I love what we do. I didn't choose emergency medicine. It chose me, right? It's going to take some of you all, and I'm excited for this moment to happen, is when you figure out that the whole world is full of people that can't do our job. So stand up and be proud of it and embrace it. Choose wisely the voice that you listen to. If it's negative, if it's cynical, and it is so prevalent in our culture right now, be careful how you let it enter your brain. You've only got one headspace to live in, so let's try to make it as positive and pleasant as we can.
Dr. Mills, I'd love to hear from you as someone that's, Dr. Omar Mania is on the call as well, and he, along with others, are saying right now, literally as we're talking about all this, is the 7 p.m. clap. I got to hear from you being on the front lines in New York City and your department. Give us a few words.
Yeah, regarding the last question? Yeah.
Or anything. I mean, of all the chairs right now, you're in a very unique position, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a really tough few months, I'll say, for a lot of different reasons. But I will echo what my other colleagues have said tonight, is that I think now more than ever, emergency medicine has stepped up and is actually getting the recognition that we've always deserved and that we know, but we're okay not getting it, because that's why we went into this, right? We went into it to do the right thing and care for patients 24/7, 365, no matter what, And I think people are recognizing that. And not only that, but I think when you start looking around, so many of our colleagues now are becoming deans and becoming administrators in health in hospitals and things like that, which I think maybe hasn't been that way traditionally for emergency medicine. So I do think in the House of Medicine, EM is getting its due and recognizing that we do understand the way the health system works, right? We see things from every single patient, every disease, every department. We know how to collaborate. We know how to advocate. We know how to listen. We have all those skills, and I think it's being recognized.
I'll just throw my few words in there. I advise a lot of students, and if I'm really honest with them, brutally honest, and try to make sure they understand that this is a difficult job. It's chaotic, it's messy, but it's meaningful. And those students that are really looking for a meaningful job, not a cakewalk, those are the ones we want to come to emergency medicine. And I would tell that same student who brought these issues up that really make sure this is right for him or her, because I think if they're not ready for those challenges, then they probably should go elsewhere.
Pathology.
It's great to hear from everyone here. It's inspiring words, especially during a time where we're actually getting a lot of recognition. I feel proud to be an emergency physician right now.
That's right, Nihal. You should.
I always have, but I never felt any better about it. It's been a great decision so far. So we'll end on a really positive note here. What really brings you joy each week, each month, both as an EM chair and as an emergency physician? I think it's an easy question to answer for all of us. But we want to hear a little bit more from your wisdom.
What gives me joy is really seeing my team succeed. You know, the faculty, the staff, the trainees, the students, being able to mentor someone, a med student on a paper, and then they present it as an abstract at a national meeting. You know, there's nothing better than that. Or having a faculty member win an award. I mean, that's really what it's all about. Is you know, allowing people the space and the opportunities to achieve what they want to achieve.
Speaking of awards, Dr. Blum-Combs, I understand that today your department got named the AWEM's Outstanding Department in terms of what it's doing for female leadership. So that has to give you joy, right?
Yeah, it does. And the thing is, I didn't think we were ready for it. And when my faculty members approached me and said, let's nominate ourselves for this award, I said, I think there's a lot more work to do, and I don't think we're ready. Maybe next year. And they sort of behind my back wrote my letter and then asked me at the last minute to put my signature to it, which meant a lot to me. But it also said we always have a lot of work to do in that, and there's always going to be work to do. But it's important to take the time to celebrate the small victories whenever they occur, however they occur. And yes, I will have to say that did bring me great joy.
So I agree with both of you. I agree with Dr. Mills in that watching residents and faculty grow, possibly because of your mentorship in some ways, is just astoundingly fulfilling. The other thing I can tell you is after all these years, I still tremendously enjoy clinical care and bedside teaching. It's one of my absolute greatest joys to be in the clinical area with residents and learners and be able to interact in front of patients with them. I hope those of you who aspire to leadership never lose the joy of caring for patients too.
You know, one thing I want to throw in to just kind of thinking about what it is that we do and love. I want to take it out of the professional area a little bit because watching the residents succeed is great. And this time of the academic year, you know, especially seeing the seniors and some of the chairs, I think you'll probably agree it's time for them to go. You need to go. It's time to get your jobs and move on. But thinking about other things that bring me joy, when we had our last EMRA hangout, I was sitting in this chair watching my kids make a tent to camp out in. And that was just a neat experience. And so as rewarding, as wonderful, as meaningful as this experience is, being a chair, being a leader, mentoring people, don't forget to integrate the other aspects of your life that bring you joy as well.
I'll just add and say that, you know, I think to be a leader, be a chair means in some ways, not maybe, it really does mean this, putting your personal interest aside, and your job really becomes taking care of your faculty and the learners in your department. It's really, and I live by, I think of being a chair sort of like being a maestro, where if they're succeeding, that's a reflection on your success. And that means the whole of the department is succeeding. So nerdy thing though, my absolute favorite thing as a chair, and hopefully some of the others on the line can relate to this, is when I get word that someone I put up for promotion has been granted it. That is, there is no higher, that is like crack open the beer cans. I am super stoked and excited. I know it's kind of nerdy, but I'm so excited for them. And I'm so excited that as a department, we have put another person up, and we had 4 people this year. So I'm really happy about that too. Thank you, Andre. Yeah, I'm not a beer. So Dr. Hughes, you're right. I'm not really a beer person, but I was trying to be relatable. I'm a martini guy. All right, so martini.
Yeah, let's keep it real, Dr. Martin. I know you're not a beer guy.
The guy doesn't come
I'm
off.
trying to convert you to Scotch, but you just won't do it.
I know. Hey, Gabe, look, I'm loving the matching suit with the grand piano. Like, that's what we all need in life.
So that's not a grand piano. That's a harpsichord. And,
Oh,
and
okay.
so this is my ego.
So proves my point even more so.
Wait. This is my ego showing.
Okay.
So this is obviously a staged photo, right? So I took a year off between internship and residency and built that thing.
You built the harpsichord.
Yeah, I built that thing. One of my proudest achievements. That has absolutely nothing to do with medicine.
So
That's a
So I
gap
have to
year.
show it to everybody right now.
That's a gap year for a high achiever, by the way.
Yeah.
Build a harpsichord. Right.
Yeah.
There's already a lot of goals we can already start looking to achieve as residents too. I can all take years off to do a project of our own. I really appreciate some of the goals and joys you have because I know that there are things you are pushing each day, but there's something that each of us can do right now. And that's really good to hear that career development starts every day.
Yeah, so we are, believe it or not, out of time for the very first portion of this, but it's going to get so much better because there's a ton of questions that have come through the chat and just not enough time to ask them in this setting. So we've arranged for small groups for each of you to join all of our chairs. So how is this going to work? You're going to do absolutely nothing other than maybe refill your drink. But since we're not coming back to this room, I wanted to just take a moment and on behalf of EMRA and SAEM RAMS, we wanted to thank all of our panelists, all of our chairs for joining us today. So if we could give a virtual snap or round of applause to each of them for their vulnerability, their intimacy, and their time. But the thank yous don't stop there because this could not have happened without EMRA and SAEM staff, especially Holly and Kathy. So thank you both.
And Melissa.
And of course, Melissa. Thank you, Dr. Martin.
Yeah.
All of them, truly. This is a group effort. And I think the thing that I personally am hoping that everybody takes away from today is one, it doesn't matter if chair is in your future or not, but the moment to make ourselves better is now. But also, in the setting of COVID, when everything might feel a little bit disjointed or perhaps like a gloomy day, emergency medicine is a community that sticks together. Doesn't matter where you are in the country, what department you come from, what your lineage is, what board you represent. We are all one big EM family. And so thank you all for this, but don't go away because we're going to automatically transport you into a small group so you can keep talking with chairs on an individual basis. So cheers to all of you. We'll see you in small groups.
Dr. Nate, this is awesome.